Welcome to the podcast Real Talk with Sudhanya. Today's guest is Anne Vanderkiesen. She's a certified personal development coach with a background in financial consulting in the corporate industry for many years. She embarked the journey of coaching to help men who are successful. They have it all, but need support to deal with the inner world. This conversation gave me some really interesting insights about how the inner world works for men. And what I find really intriguing about Anne is her take on mythology to understand this inner world. Enjoy. Okay, I'm ready.
You're ready. I'm ready too.
Ready? Let's do it.
See what emerges.
Hi, Anne. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sudhanya. Thank you for having me here.
With pleasure. And what I'm most curious about is you work with men who are successful in the corporate, especially finance consulting. That's your background. And what you help them is to navigate their inner world, who are externally successful. Now, coming from a very successful financial consulting world, which is very much given that it's secured outside, what's your drive to make this change to become a personal development expert for men? What's your personal drive?
Thank you for asking. And I want to be honest with this one because I think it's really important. As I could tell the nice story that's, just based on inspiration, and it was all, a drive from my heart and a calling. But to be honest, it really started from a place of pain for me, from meeting my own sort of internal struggles in doing the work that I was doing, like you said, externally successful, but inside feeling this great sense that something was missing. And it wasn't an experience that I felt that was unique to me, because I looked around me, working with a lot of men in the finance industry, in particular mergers and acquisitions. It's mainly men, be around 80% at the time where I was there. And I saw a lot of the guys also suffering, but a great reluctance to talk about it. And sometimes we would sort of glaze over the topic, late at night.
What kind of suffering?
Just the constant demands and pressure and the stress, feeling like there was some sort of level, some sort of bar to live up to, always delivering a quality product, always being available, for some of the men also serving as a provider for their families. That pull of I have to be available for my work, but then my wife's ringing me, you're going to be home to have dinner with the kids, and so there was all kind of things that were going on around me that I just didn't feel right about. And I guess I was in the position where I didn't have a family and children to have to provide for, and I thought, if I stay here long term, I'm going to get to a point where it's going to be very difficult to step out.
Not sustainable at all.
No, exactly. So I made the decision to step out of the industry. Sort of a bit of a story there, but I don't think it sort of adds to the answer here. But I stepped out quite quickly. It was really a clean break for me, and to explore the tools that I could use for healing myself, but also something that I could use to help others. There was always sort of two tracks running. There was how can I move through my own pain and understand that and heal that, but also what sort of skill set can I cultivate that I can actually give back and help other people in this way.
It's interwoven, right?
Yeah.
Your own, what you need to feel healed and nurtured, and what you have to give to the world as your, the ultimate skill set or the ultimate medicine. What I say is,
absolutely.
it's when you help, you also receive equal amounts of healing.
Yeah, no, very, very true.
Yeah.
It was something that just felt important. Like it may not make a lot of sense, but at some point I felt I just don't have a choice in this. It felt bigger than me. I threw myself into the personal development world, first of all with hypnotherapy, and then sort of building on a more specific sort of coaching skill set within that, to make it a little bit more accessible for the average man. Also, because not everybody wants to do hypnotherapy. It can be a bit of a scary idea.
What is hypnotherapy?
It's essentially it's a tool to get sort of behind the conscious mind and into the subconscious and understand what's happening at that level. So in terms of what's happening in the brain when you're in hypnosis, it's really a slowing down of our brain waves, which enables us to sort of go a little bit deeper. You can reach similar states through things like meditation, chanting, even sexual experiences. And there's all kinds of ways to change our brain waves, but hypnosis is a very specific form, just using the voice essentially as a way to guide somebody into that state where sort of memories are a little bit more accessible. Again, noting that memories can also be fallible. They're not always representative of the facts of how things happened.
But the perception,
it's the perception, and that's what matters. So if we can use a tool like hypnosis to sort of go into the mind and see what's happening there, see what dynamics might not be sort of supportive for the individual in achieving what they want to achieve, and healing at that level, sort of in creating the intervention at that deep level, at the belief system level, essentially, is the aim. And then sort of coming back into life and integrating that and operating from that new way of being.
Wow.
So it's a very powerful tool. But some hypnotherapists may debate me on this, but I don't believe that it's the most effective thing for everyone. For some people, it can be radical night and day results, but for other people, maybe a subtle shift, but not sort of the earth-shattering move that a lot of people hope for when they do something like hypnotherapy.
Have you yourself experienced some radical shifts or
not in hypnotherapy? No, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to go further also.
Okay.
Yeah, because I thought, well, I did also benefit from receiving some hypnotherapy. I got some really interesting insights about sort of the frames that I look through the world at.
What did you see?
One of the main things that I discovered there was just this feeling of inadequacy, of no matter what I do, I'm not good enough. And that drove a lot of the sort of unhealthy behaviours that I engaged in when I was in the workforce and full-time work. In consulting, and it was a perfect match, really. I mean, have somebody who feels inadequate and give them a never-ending flow of work, and it's perfect, really, isn't it?
All right, yeah.
It makes for a very successful consultant, but also a very unfulfilled one.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
Yeah. So that, I think that was really the main thing that I discovered. But I was able to build that awareness, but not necessarily replace it with something that was more helpful. It was like, I know that I'm making a lot of decisions from this place of inadequacy, but I don't really know how to actually overcome that and how to shift that. And it was a bit disjointing for me, because I was at the same time seeing some great results with clients that were having these radical shifts, but I didn't have it myself. And it wasn't every client. So I thought there's more to the story here. It's not as simple as just using one tool for everyone.
Wow.
There's
So what was the next stage?
I sort of, my path wasn't straightforward. I did a few different things. I did a little bit of freelance work in the learning and development space to sort of prop me up as I was going along. But I studied a few different things. I studied Reiki, so looking at the energy fields. But I think the most profound thing that I've done so far was a coaching certification that took a lot of the both traditional sort of coaching methods and models, but also introduced some of the somatic pieces and really sort of engaging with what was happening in the body. Because again, hypnotherapy is quite mental.
Mind,
you're really, really working through the mind to
calm
potentially
the mind.
access the body. But it's all very mental, very intellectual. So learning a few of these somatic practices and understanding the power of breath work. I'm not a certified breathwork practitioner, but I've done a bit of breath work myself, a few different sort of methods. I also studied the Wim Hof method for a little while.
Oh, yeah.
Also the cold exposure element to that, which is fascinating too.
Yeah.
But essentially, I just kept exploring, sort of taking this view of how can I just gain more understanding of how people work and what people respond to and what they don't. But the somatic piece was a big one. And integrating some of these ideas that are also considered somewhat esoteric. So the sexuality piece and the sexual energies, the masculine and feminine, for instance, not in terms of gender, but the way that we operate from. So for me, when I was in consulting, primarily acting from my sort of masculine energetic, so very sort of structured and driven, a little bit more sort of that forceful energy, probably a little bit of that unhealthy expression. So learning that there's another half to that as well. There's also a healthy expression of the masculine, but then there's this whole new world of what about if I'm acting from that feminine aspect? And from there, a whole new world sort of opened up as I sort of started to build up the picture, because I could see people that I was serving also in my practice, not just as, coming with a problem to solve, as tends to be what the hypnotherapy as a modality attracts. It's like, oh, I've got anxiety, can you fix it?
Yeah.
But really building out the whole picture of somebody's life, and they're understanding their story and where they come from, and some of the baggage that they've picked up along the way, and helping to very gently just release that, put it down, creating new sort of strategies to help them thrive in a healthier way, you might say. But really, really just, I think my whole process, if I was to sort of define it, would be really learning to take the whole person into account.
Not just anxiety, or not just the external successes and stuff.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, I think most men deal with it, but in current times, I think both deal with it. When you're externally successful, it's very difficult to accept that there is something internally wrong with me. That's one thing. And also in a world where we are so much driven with rational logic and number game, looking inside can be also, it's too skeptical. There's so much of resistance. Did you encounter these two factors with your clients?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Although I think these days for people to sort of open the conversation with me, they know a little bit what they're going to get. They know that they have to break through some of these sort of limitations they hold in their own mind, trying to fit things into logic and reasoning. It's definitely been something that has shown up, and it will continue to, and there's levels to it also. Somebody might come into say a coaching trajectory with me, and they've got one particular thing that they see as the problem that needs to be solved, for lack of a better word. I don't look at it as that way, but they tend to. So you honor that. But then these other things emerge, and what tends to happen is that the person sitting in the coachee seat starts to realize that life isn't so black and white, that there's so much nuance to be embraced, and that all things are interconnected in some way or another. And especially when you're working with things like shame, it's very irrational, and there tends to be a felt experience of that. The emotions that start to move about when you give space for it, and when you really create that sort of loving, curious container to see what emerges. It is confusing, and that's part of what I believe needs to be embraced through the process, is really leaning away a little bit from that need to put logic and rationality around it, but actually just trust the sort of the movement of the energy, emotion being energy in motion. But there's definitely an experiential part of it also.
Do you have for example, an example to share. Of course, keeping all privacy in mind, about dealing with shame, because I feel, based on all the podcast and the people I am, interacting with, it's a common challenge in the men's world, that men go through, and I'm like, I have no clue why.
Yeah. Well, I'll speak to two sides of a little bit a similar story, and it's something that happens, I think, a lot more often than what we like to speak about. That's infidelity. So I've supported both men who have, for example, cheated on their wives or significant others, but also men who have been cheated on. And it's super interesting to me that the experience of shame that happens there is quite similar.
Oh, okay.
And it's very easy for us to go, oh, that person who cheated is bad, and that person who was cheated on is a victim. But it's generally not reflective of the actual experience that the individual is having. But it's very confusing. Again, this is why logic doesn't really help here, because if that would be the logic,
essentially, the judgment that cheating is bad, but still somebody ends up doing it, to know the reason beneath it, and that not one person it's to be targeted. So tell me an example where both, like one of the examples where both happened, and how did you deal with it? Like, how do you help them to process this whole emotion?
Yeah, well, when I'm working with men, I think logic becomes not sort of the end game, but a tool that we can use. And one way to put some sort of, we'll say, like a healthier form of rationality, rather than just judging and saying that's wrong and that's right, the binary.
Very important, yeah.
Yeah, but and another way to look at it is, okay, well, what are the needs that are on the table in the context of the relationship? So it doesn't really matter which one you're looking at, but what are the needs of both people in the context of that relationship, and were they being met? If not, why not? And when we can look at it like that, say the action of cheating. Okay, I was in a position where my needs weren't being met, and the only way that my subconscious was able to find a way to have those needs met was to do something that society says is wrong. So it's a really interesting one that comes up. But when you start to see it like that, and give a little bit of structure to it from that perspective of needs, it's like, oh, okay, so maybe it's not behavior I'm proud of. Maybe I wish that I had some other tools to be able to actually communicate what was going on and see if I could resolve it in a way that had less fallout. But also building that ability to have compassion for the experience. It's like we can only operate with the knowledge that we have at a certain point in time.
Yeah. But also, I have to also commend that it's a pattern that at least has been going on for ages, where infidelity is mainly tagged to men. And I'm not saying that it's always the case, but in general, I would say that's the case. Maybe driven by sexual needs, maybe driven by, the idea that men can go around and fuck anybody. Like that's I would say a belief that is prevalent or celebrated. I don't know what, but still we have the other way around, where traditions, religions have told that, oh, you should not do that. And I think modern men, or just not modern, let's take last 100 years, you are in this crux. Which one is right? And still, if you're compulsive to act out of your physical needs and not out of integrity, you would end up doing this. Or maybe I'm also having, as I'm saying this, I feel like I'm also having a judgment around it, saying that, okay, that's bad. But how So what's your personal opinion in it? Like, I guess that, you help men to process that in a more compassionate way. What's your personal take on this pattern?
Yeah, well, I love this question. And if you asked me 2 years ago, I probably would have had a very different answer. And I think it's really important for us to actually speak out our judgments, first of all, and look at them and just, see them outside of us for a moment, because I think we all have them, and I would be lying if I said that I didn't have them. And just to preface my answer, I think when I'm in a one-on-one container with a client, and I'm really there for their highest and best outcome. So I'm meeting them where they're at, and I really leave my judgments at the door. I mean, that's part of my commitment to showing up. But it is humbling sometimes, because sometimes in doing that, it's really like, I'm forcing myself to really look at my judgments at the same time. I mean, there's always going to be that little bit of resonance of those judgments there. So it's been a really fascinating experience actually supporting men, like you say, on both sides. I don't know the data about, is it more men that cheat or more women that cheat, but I've supported an equal number of people on both sides. So,
really?
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. It's nuanced, but I think when it comes to men engaging in infidelity, I think really one of the biggest challenges, biggest things that holds them back from avoiding those kind of behaviors that they end up judging themselves for is this lack of ability to communicate. There's a huge detachment from themselves and what's important to them and what matters to them. And if you're out of touch with that, then how can you possibly put words around your experience and say to your partner, for instance, I'm not feeling like I'm good enough, or I'm loved, because I'm not receiving the physical intimacy from you that I would like to have. And it's much easier actually just to go and get that need met elsewhere than really sit down and go,
have this conversation.
This is me and my heart.
Yeah.
So those are the skill sets that really need to be looked at for men who are on that side. And it shows up a little bit differently when you're talking to men who've feeling more a victim of infidelity, who experience that on the other side. It's like, well, what about me was not good enough to cause my partner to go out and get their needs met elsewhere? So there's this questioning of manhood, which is,
I'm not man enough.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting that those two expressions they're generally both driven by a sense of inadequacy on some level. Wow. And that's, I think, where it helps as a professional space holder, if you like, as I am, and what you do for people. We understand what it's like to feel inadequate. So I think when you get to that level, when you can have a conversation at that point, and can we agree that there's this experience of inadequacy, the judgments actually don't matter anymore, because all we want to do then is just sit in that space of compassion and feel that and allow that to be. And then you come back to the logical, rational piece of building whatever skill set needs to be built around that to overcome, to heal, to give it a proper place in the story. I think that's important also. So it's like the bigger picture of what does this mean about me and my life and what I've created. So really addressing that in the storyline for the individual is important too.
Yeah, because sometimes with these kind of conversations, I find it difficult, and I end up judging because I might have a strong value, for example, a fundamental value set to be trust as a core value. And when I see the other side is definitely infidelity is about breaking the trust commitment, it is quite intrinsic, and I would say in kind of valid also, to judge that like, oh, you have done something wrong.
Yeah.
Because you have broken the code of trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I find it very difficult to have compassion because it's fundamentally, I'm trying to hold space for something which I don't agree with. And then I am in conflict with my own values, because one thing I have learned from everything that I've learned is that I need to be committed to my own values. I need to be integrated, act from my value. Yeah, whether you want to be monogamous or polygamous, that's be clear on it and be act out of integrity or whatever in everything. And that causes a lot of inner conflict than anything external visible. Do you have that challenge too, like something which has you have a strong value set around it, and you're confronting somebody who has broken that value set?
All the time. Yeah, no, really. It's in some strange way, it's really actually one of the things I love about the work that I get to do, because it's always inviting me into sort of questioning these things in myself, and really understanding sort of the fundamental nature at play here. And what I will say is that I just don't think that there's any benefit really from making somebody wrong. I mean, I still do it. I'm human too.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend that I've cast my humanity aside. I still do it probably on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
But when I really sort of stop and give loads of presence and loads of space to what's in front of me, whether that's with a client or whether it's looking at what's happening in my own life, I can generally get to the point where it's like, yeah, okay, I don't need to add that label of it's wrong or right or okay or not okay. Or it's hard to do. Like, this is the grit work, I would say.
Yeah.
Like it's heart-wrending, but it's also very, very valuable, I think.
How do you navigate that? Because at the end, if you want to navigate somebody to act with their values or act with integrity, at some point, holding space, compassion, it's important to see yourself as a flawed being, and that's beautiful. And from there, what does that mean? Do you continue being disloyal? Do you continue acting the same way, and every time you do it, oh, I have a coach now, she will hold space for me, and then I'll resolve my inner conflict? That's a loop.
Yeah. So maybe to put a value kind of higher than wrong or right, is truth for me. And I think that's something that you and I probably share in common, that we both have this respect for the truth. And maybe this is a bold thing to say, but I don't think that anybody is really okay with engaging in infidelity where it's not allowed. Like you said, some people have polyamorous relationships or whatever sort of agreements are in place, and that's different. It's within agreements. But when somebody knows that they're doing something they're not allowed to do, I don't believe that they want to keep doing it. And so it's important to get behind also, and have that person also make a declaration to themselves of like, I've done something that I'm not okay about doing, and I don't want to continue this way. It's actually making me feel worse every time I engage in it. Because I mean, sometimes it's a one-off, sometimes these things are structural for a long time. But to really invite the other person or yourself, myself, into a space of truth, and actually what is really at play here. Because sometimes it is really heartbreaking. It's like, well, actually, I do want to leave my marriage. I want to leave my kids behind, and that's really painful because my dad left us, and I don't want to do the same thing to my kids. But I'm in so much pain, so I go elsewhere. So the conversation then becomes not about the act, but about the truth of the situation and reconciling at that level. And it's not for me to say somebody should go and tell what they've done or not, or whether they should try and repair the marriage or not. I've seen it go all kinds of ways. But it's really just continuing to sort of push until we get to the truth of what's really going on. And I think if you're to look through the lens of values and what's important, I think truth is really the highest, I would say, for me. And that's what I invite into the coaching container also, because I think we can really all benefit from that.
Wow, that's very intense. How do you personally, like after such intense navigation, how do you personally, because there is a post-processing for yourself also to replenish all the space that you hold. How do you take care of that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a really important question to ask. And I think for anybody who's in the space holding kind of business, whether it's personal development or therapy or healing, whatever
coaching,
it might be.
Any kind of caregiving.
Yeah. I think it's something that's really not spoken about enough, because I would say that I need probably twice the amount of time that I have one-on-one with the client to then actually go and balance my own sort of energy field and come back to sort of a neutral place, which for somebody, again, sort of talking about these sort of different ways of operating, somebody who's very mental and logical and rational, and they'd be like, okay, so you coach for 90 minutes and then you need 3 hours to recover. Like, that's ridiculous, right? But I thought the same in the beginning, and I've tried to pack too much in, and I experienced what happened when I didn't create that space. So it's really of primary importance to have that spaciousness around and allow things to metabolize in the system, because I do think we all have really an emotional body. And I mean, if you want to talk in terms of science, we have a nervous system, and that operates in terms of the energetic flows that are going around our body, and we can measure what emotions feel like in the body. But there's this energetic resonance that goes through, so it's important to give space to allow that. Also to learn what belongs to other people and what belongs to us as the practitioners. It's important to keep working on making that differentiation.
Do you have a favorite practice to bring that balance inside and to let go of others?
Yeah, my absolute favorite saving grace is going into nature. It's if I don't do that every day, I really feel it. So most mornings I'm going out walking, just getting ready for the day. Some clients I work with are in Australia, so I'm getting up and doing an early start, so I don't always do my walk before that. But really afterwards, just clearing and just allowing that sort of space, that silence, just to give room for all of the thoughts to kind of come and go. And also being a little bit diligent, like, again, talking about the masculine and feminine, like leveraging that healthy masculine side of myself to put some structure around it. Like, okay, noting down, these are the things that we talked about. These are the things that need to be specifically followed up. Okay, I'm closing my notebook. And when I'm closing my notebook, I'm also, trusting that person's process and letting them have it. Because I think there's a temptation also in the healing space to take other people's stuff on ourselves.
Yes, so taking responsibility and, be this hero or female hero in somebody's life, that I'm going to resolve everything. But
yeah, exactly.
To remind yourself you can only empower. At the end, the responsibility lies with the other side.
Yeah, and I would even go further than to say empower, because I think on some level, by looking at ourselves as somebody to empower others, we're sort of taking away some of their power, but maybe to inspire them to empower themselves.
Exactly, yeah, so that's a better word.
I know that's sort of the semantics a little bit specific, but I think it's important, because those 3 hours that I take for every 90-minute session, that's not for my client and for me to figure out all of their things and come back and give them a report of all the things they need to do. No, it's about me taking care of me, which I think is part of my duty of care, of showing up properly for my clients.
That's very important to realize, and to the change the narrative around caregiving, for example, which I really feel for mothers. To Like mothers hold this unique position in our society, who supports the children, supports the family. But I have realized if the mother or the woman in the family is not happy, nobody's happy. And many times, I think the woman herself is responsible for that drain, because
Yeah.
you have to take your own responsibility to also say no sometimes, to replenish, know what makes you feel received from your family, from the outside your family, and have that healthy circle of replenishment. That's also a responsibility.
Yeah, it is absolutely, and I think particularly the last maybe 50, 60, 70 years has been really, really difficult for women
Yeah.
in navigating all their roles, like motherhood. Okay, then with the rise of feminism, I'm also expected to be, working and contributing to society, and then the shape of households changes. So then we need two incomes, and then who's there for the kids, and the extraordinary number of single parent households where it's the mum who's raising the kids and working. So there's so many things to contend with all at once here, and I think that's part of the fallout that we're really seeing at the moment, and I think why so many men in particular have these challenges of navigating certain things in their lives, because they've missed a lot that sort of contact with their mothers and going through those sort of earlier stages of development, because there's just been so much more for women to hold. And now on a practical level, it's hard for mothers to take space, with all of the expectations around it. So it's, I mean, in me having this desire to serve men, it doesn't mean that women don't need support as well, because they really do. There's so much nuance, so many complicated things that we've all got to navigate here, and it's all sewn together in my eyes when I look at it. None of these sort of challenges that are showing up in our modern society are in isolation.
I totally support that, because what you're doing for men is actually helping women, because we need healthy both counterparts to weave a better society, right? So it's just not, of course, I think there is a need to get out of this fake feminism and really find what does a female space look like, and how can a society support that, and how can a modern man support that. That's something that's very crucial in our current times, to rediscover that, or I don't know, find the balance. Because trust I don't feel there's a sustainable solution that a woman can have it all, have a kid, have a successful career, keep the house completely spick and span, and have the most perfect social gatherings. It's too much. It's too much. And then you have all these pictures on social media about how perfect my family is. And the more I look into depth of it, and the more I know the closer truth, there is a whole dark side where it's all fake. And then I'm like, do we want to keep on building a faker society where it's not sustainable for any of us? So it's so important to also receive help, to enable the healthy men to also be able to provide in a way that will nourish the feminine side, females, it's so much more. So I guess I totally agree with you that, okay, you finding your calling to help men, which I also feel strongly that because the narrative around men cannot express their feelings, or should not, it's weak, and so much of baggage around it has also caused the current realm of suffering.
Absolutely. And we are really all in this together.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that there's help offered for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I see, like when I look out into the personal development industry at large, there's so many women who are supporting only women, which again is beautiful, it's needed. But there's just not a lot of voices out there who are really taking a stand for men. And when they do, there's this risk of, that's toxic masculinity. So I think that we're in a nice position, right? Because we are women taking a stand for men, and it's pretty hard to call that toxic masculinity. And I believe we throw these labels around way too easily these days also. But I think it's just so important that we remember that we're all in this together, and that we look at how the needs actually differ. For a large part, they're the same, but also they're different. And I think it's important to really honor the individual there and create space for men to also be who they really want to be. Because I think that's also something that we don't talk about a lot, is that while women's roles in society have changed so much in the recent decades, and where we are powerful now, we can go and get the same jobs that men are getting for a large part. There's still inequality out there, but for a large part there's a lot of opportunity also. However, the men, and it still seems to be in the psyche, the men still sort of hold this role of the provider for a large part, even if it's not the reality, but there's an internal mechanism at play that sort of makes them believe that they have to have it all together, that they have to, go and study and get the good job and be able to support their family, and implying you have to get married, have to have kids, do all of these things,
be the breadwinner and all these things.
Yeah, but then you miss something that's very rich and very important, in that everyone, I believe, has this pure essence. There's something inside of them that wants to be expressed in the world. We can talk about it as, the soul calling. You can call it the genius. Socrates used to call his daemon. There's a sort of voice inside of his head that told him what he should be doing for his sort of highest and best interest. And I think it's such a shame that men still feel this pull towards the provider role, to the extent that it limits them from actually being honest about what they want and what they really care about.
Explore even. Because the moment you have finished your studies, there is a need that you get into this mechanical life of getting job, kids, family, car, house, and then age.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think in terms of the men's mental health space, I think this is a massive thing. Because when I say to you midlife crisis, do you think of a woman or a man? I know I think of a man.
Right? Yeah. And the 40s and something like that.
Yeah. So you think, well, what's going on for this, or for this collective of men who need to have a crisis in order to wake up to who they are, and why is that not such a thing for women? So I think that there's a lot of interesting layers to explore here when it comes to men, and giving them a space to really find out who they are and what's important to them. As you said, what are their values? What would living a life that was fully expressed mean for a man? Would it be doing the consulting job until they retire at 60 on a nice pension, and I don't know, buying a yacht? Maybe, but maybe not also. And I think it's hard to ask these questions because of all of the societal expectations that are still there for men.
And I feel that in this sense, female leadership is very much needed, because what you are doing is that holding that space, the safe space, to actually nurture and look deeper into whatever blame, shame, guilt, and find through that their inner calling. And I feel that's a very, I wouldn't say a gender-based, a very feminine quality to alchemize and to hold and provide that space, the womb space, kind of, to turn into, your challenges into whatever power you are meant to.
Yeah. I think it is, and I think because of that, it's also something that hasn't been fully embraced. I think there's still a lot of stigma around, why would you have a coach? I can understand having a coach for getting a promotion, or playing a sport, or something that's a bit more specific and tangible. But people are still going, well, why would I get a coach for professional development?
Yeah.
And I think the simplest answer to that is because the village doesn't provide it anymore. I think it used to some generations ago, but it's not part of our society anymore. And so if we do want to become somebody who can like look back at the end of our lives and say, yeah, I explored, I found out who I was and who I wasn't, and have a rich story to tell, then it is important to ask these questions. And again, it's not for everyone. It's also fine if people don't ever engage in this stuff. And
I think it's for people who want to grow.
Yeah.
And it's fine. If I actually have a lot of respect if you're okay with everything.
I have a bit of jealousy for that. Sometimes I go, if I could just turn all of this off.
Yeah. This constant need to, find what's there on the edge and to grow. It's not everybody's cup of tea, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Let's wrap up. But one thing that is very interesting when I was browsing your website, and also I see your LinkedIn messages, is about all the mythological knowledge that you have and your interpretation around it, and through a lens of self-development. Yeah, and that's very unique and fascinating. And of late, I have been a lot into mythology, and I feel that there is so much of treasure.
Yeah.
Although it's so unbelievable, all the characters. Tell me about this passion of yours.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty recent passion of mine, but I've so loved it. Because for those that are a bit sort of newer to mythology, there's a really special part of it that it's very dark. And I think it gives a lot of sort of respect to the human experience and the things that we all sort of move through. And it tells these, ridiculous stories, but actually if we ground them down in reality, it's like, it makes a lot of sense. So it's for me, it's sort of a storytelling tool to look at mythology and offer that with some sort of links to the modern world and what's going on. One example I have is, people might know the myth of Icarus, who was escaping with his father, and he had these wings that were made of feathers that were stuck to him with wax. And he was so excited to be able to fly, and he flew up higher and higher and higher until he got too close to the sun, and the wax melted off his feathers, and he fell to the ground or into the sea, I believe, and perished. And what it's speaking to is this person who sort of doesn't see any limits, somebody who believes that anything is possible. And when I read that story for the first time, I immediately thought of Elon Musk. I thought, like, he's off there going to Mars, planning on going to Mars.
Yeah.
And I love that, because I think we need characters like Elon Musk in the world to kind of challenge what's possible. And, maybe at some point he gets too close to the sun and his feathers melt off and he falls.
It's happening.
Yeah. I'm sure people have their judgments one way or the other on Elon Musk. But I like to just look at it as a story and as something that's rather comical, actually, and just see, like, how far can he go? Because if you told somebody, say even 5 years ago, what Elon Musk was doing now, this year in 2022, they would say, that's completely ridiculous. But now it's happening.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
Yeah.
To aim higher. Like what you're mentioning is that the myths also give us such a huge platform to give characters to our own inner world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a really beautiful way to describe it. And
Yeah.
I haven't spoken about it too much, like in terms of writing articles and content around it, but I've also done a little bit of reading into the Indian mythology, and
Yeah.
it's come a little bit into pop psychology now, this idea of the goddess Kali, who represents, anger and destruction and sort of burning things down. There's a lot more nuance to it, of course,
Yeah,
which I'm
I
sure
think
you're,
so. That's the
you're
Western
intimate
version
with.
of it.
Yeah, but I think that's really interesting to look at these kind of things. And now it's like when I have an experience of sort of anger and wanting to destroy things, I'm like, oh, Kali is present in me.
Yes.
It gives us a character to be able to step into.
And the fact that it is also important because we have also created a la la land for ourselves where we suffer because our goal is to be always be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And not embrace the Kali, the darkness in us, and be able to play and, play with blood and just, be that raw. And that's, I think, more fascinating to explore all the dimensions that we can have. And that's what mythology, indeed, Kali. For example, I come from Bengal. We celebrate goddess Durga. And it's also based on a mythological character or story where we worship goddess Durga, and she has 10 hands. And in all her hands there is a weapon, and there is this devil Mahisasur, which she's killing. And when we worship both of them. We actually worship the devil, who is a bit lower, and of course Durga, who is symbolizes power and strength. And for me, I'm not religious, but it gives me immense sense of power to witness these rituals and traditions, because for me, like, this depicts my inner world. This is exactly, I have this part of me which is very optimistic, upward going, but there is also a part of me that wants to tell me that I'm inadequate. I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty. I'm who am I to even have this podcast? Like, there is a part of me which is constantly sabotaging me. And then there is a part of me which is like, no, you need courage as a weapon. You need to take actions as a weapon, and all these things. And always to find that balance and let that power kind of always try to fight and win over that inner saboteur. And that's so powerful to look at traditions and mythology like that.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think so often we lose the richness, lose touch of the richness and beauty of life by only focusing on the good, by only focusing on the accomplishments and achievements and moving forward and feeling joyous and playful and free. That's all lovely.
Yeah.
But there is so much beauty to be embraced by really looking at our darkness, even like looking head on, like what we talked about, the infidelity piece. How can I look at that and see beauty and feel softness towards that aspect too? And that's a really, really tough one.
It's a tough one, and to learn, because coaching a client is different, but putting yourself in that space and having that, knowing that this can happen with me too, is something totally different. And if you genuinely, for example, you want to be true to your values and to the truth, you have to put yourself in that situation and think for your client or whomever, think for, even maybe you are in that situation, from that perspective, and to search for the truth in it, search for the learning in it, search for the true self-love, respect, what feels right to me. And in that sense, sometimes leaving is separating is better. Sometimes forgiving is better. You don't know. Only in that, it's in the context of that realm that will make you find yourself as well. So there is so much beauty in that.
Yeah, there is. And if there's like one end game that we're playing here in this kind of, whether you call it personal development or healing or growth or whatever label you want to give it, if there's one end game to play, I think it's that of integration, which requires like really bringing in all of these parts of ourselves and acknowledging that they all make up the whole. Like I am not me, and without my rage, for instance. I am not me, and without my sense of inadequacy. And it's what makes up our humanity. And it is complicated. It is. I'm the first to admit that, and that's been my personal experience. And maybe it's an infinite game. This idea of recalling all of these exiled parts to ourselves. But it's really, I think, the way to become a powerful human being, to really embrace and give love to those aspects of ourselves. And I say it very simply, but it's
tough job.
It can be a gut-wrenching process. Yeah.
And that's why we need experts and coaches like you. Thank you so much, Anne, for this rich words, discussions, talks. I really enjoyed.
Yeah, me too. No, thank you for having me here and being willing to explore and see what came through today. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so many nuggets. Thank you so much.